Welcome back to the Code Ryan podcast. Today I have on Kishan to discuss React, Next.js, and general kind of development advice kind of overall. So I think a good place for us to start here is just with kind of your story of how you kind of became a developer and what kind of led you to kind of where you are today.
I'm basically from India. I am a full stack developer at a company based in India only. So I started my coding journey back in 2015 when I entered diploma in computer science. So first I started with PHP, HTML and CSS, the basic old school stuff. Then after some time we get into the Android and Kotlin, the basic syllabus stuff. And after 2021, I just got into JavaScript. I loved JavaScript. And after that, I started with React Node and the React Native. So after that, I just thought, why not to start my YouTube channel for the projects. I love creating projects, full stack projects, by the way. I created many of the projects while I was in college. So I just started my YouTube channel and I do full stack applications by using high level stuff of technologies, and that like if I'm creating a Netflix clone, then I'll just head over and do some research about what Netflix uses in their architecture and try to replicate the architecture also, not just the UI or the backend and the front end part, but also the architecture. So that's something special that I do on my channel.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would say that is definitely a special thing that you do there, as I know if I create like a Tesla clone as kind of what I've created in the past, I didn't really go and look at their architecture and kind of figure out like how they did their entire tech stack and stuff like that. So I think that's an added element that is super cool there. And your YouTube channel, is that just your name?
It's Kishan Sheth, KISHANSHETH.
Gotcha. And I will definitely have your name in this podcast so people can find that a little bit easier as well. So
Sure, man.
I think with that, you mentioned that you kind of got into JavaScript and you kind of just love that. What kind of made you really like JavaScript? Was it kind of what you could build with it, or what was kind of the reasoning there that made you dive into JavaScript and React and those things further?
So first of all, I just want to mention that JavaScript has some weird stuff. So we have to focus on that. So that was kind of a challenge to learn it. So first thing, I love challenges. So I loved the weird stuff of JavaScript, the event loop and everything, how it asynchronously works in the backend. So I loved that part. It was pretty cool. Then after that, the scalability of the language. So if we want to develop the front-end applications, we can use React. If we want to develop backend, we can just leverage the Node.js, which is also in JavaScript. We want to do mobile development, we can use React Native. We want to do desktop development, we can use Electron. So JavaScript was one in all solution for everything. So I loved about that thing.
Yeah, and that's very similar for me as well. Like when I first got into coding and programming stuff, I like the idea of being able to build both kind of mobile apps as well as web apps, and it seemed like JavaScript was a very good tool in which I could do both of those. Plus you can write code on the back end with Node and whole bunch of different stuff with it. So it was kind of, for me, more so the things that you could do with JavaScript and the popularity of it. And like you said, there are definitely some kind of quirks to JavaScript and different things like that, you know, once you kind of glimpse under the hood of how it's working, it's kind of like, wow, that's kind of interesting. But yeah, maybe that's a discussion for another day here. So I think kind of a good place to go from here is if you're creating a project just, you know, out of the fun of it, or you have your own idea of something that you want to create, what is kind of your preferred tech stack these days? Is it, I know you have some videos on like Next.js and React, but what is kind of your preferred technologies, even when it comes to kind of like styling your applications? What are you kind of liking to use these days?
Before mentioning about that, I just want to mention that it's not about my liking. first of all, what I do is I do some research. Then I just check what's the actual use case there. If I'm creating any of the clone, so what is going to be the best solution for any of the clones or any of the projects. So in the real world scenario, we don't fix anything like we should only use React or Next.js, or we only use CSS or style components. It changes according to the needs. So that's the first thing that I see in any of the project. Then after that, I check the performance. If the app that I'm creating is a performance intensive app, then we need to introduce libraries like that. So after that, we also need to check how scalable the app should be. So at a moment, if any of my student is going to upload the project and going to use that in a real-time scenario, then how many users are going to be using that project at the same time? So scalability also matters. So according to that, I prefer my tech stack. Now, to generally, I use for front end, I use React, and nowadays I've shifted to Next.js because the capabilities that it provides. I've mastered the vanilla React first, then I've shifted to Next.js now. Then after that, for backend, I use Node.js. That's the best option. Then I just experiment with different frameworks with Node.js like Express, Happy, and all of that. And after that, I also use the backend generator tools like Application and the AppWrite platform. And after that, I also use Firebase and Supabase for the backend stuff. It aces the app. Then for database, nowadays I just use Prisma. It's the best thing that I have learned because you just have to change the parameters and it automatically converts your query from SQL to NoSQL depending upon your use case. And talking about the SQL databases, I use PostgreSQL, and for the NoSQL database, I prefer MongoDB or the Elasticsearch.
And I like how you kind of go about it with, you first think about what application you're trying to build, what are the requirements of that application, and then picking technologies based on those requirements rather than just necessarily picking technologies that you like or that you think are cool. So I think that's a good way to approach it. And one thing that you mentioned there is that you kind of first focused on kind of mastering React and really getting that down, and then transitioning to kind of learning Next.js and then starting to use that. Is that how you would also recommend someone kind of learns that today? Or would you recommend, if someone's kind of getting into the React ecosystem, would you recommend that they jump straight to Next.js? Or how would you kind of advise someone if they're kind of wanting to get into React, but they also hear about this cool kind of Next.js thing and they think that they should go that route as well? What would you kind of say to that?
So according to me, you should master React first. Nothing else matters because Next.js is a framework. It utilizes React, and you should know what React provides and what difference Next.js provides. If you don't know what are the benefits of Next.js over React, then what is the benefit of it? So in today's scenario also, I suggest that you learn vanilla React first, practice with it, learn the hydration stuff, the virtual DOM, the deep concepts of everything in React, then head over to Next.js.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that's what Next.js recommends as well, is that you first start with understanding React, and then you can move into some of the more specific Next.js stuff with different things that they do there that they offer you kind of with their conventions and different things like that from kind of their framework there. And for kind of Next.js versus React, you mentioned the importance of kind of understanding the differences between like just using Create React app versus using a Next app. What maybe are some of those differences that someone should understand between just using a basic React.js, Create React app versus using something like Next.js? What are maybe some of those differences that Next.js offers there?
If you are using CSR, then you don't have any kind of SEO on the page. So it is rendered on client side, so you cannot inject any of the dynamic SEO. And if it is from the server side, so the main advantage over it is you have the SEO inside of it. So the web browsers use SEO for their rankings. So if you are using a basic React app, then you don't have access to any kind of SEO. But if you are using Next.js, you do get the SEO using the server-side components. And in the CSRs also, they provide a solution, workaround to have the SEO. So that's the difference that I think that's the starter that everyone should understand about it.
Yeah, absolutely. They definitely have those different kind of rendering patterns between the two, to where just like a basic React app is just going to offer that kind of client-side rendering, to where with the Next.js, you can render things on the server. You can also render things at build time and then serve those statically through like a CDN or something like that as well. And then Next.js also has features of, with their now supporting server components. You can also, you can also do your fetch requests within your server components. And I personally really like it because you can get rid of a lot of client-side fetching with like use effects and stuff like that. You don't have to use that nearly as much, and you can just do it right away in your server, and then you don't have to worry about managing as much state on the client and stuff like that, which to me is like a huge benefit of it.
So day by day, it's becoming like an industry standard. So it's the full-fledged framework. So full stack framework. So you don't need to use Node.js separately. You can just use your serverless functions and write the backend stuff also in the Next.js app itself. So it's a very good benefit. But I want to add that Next.js might not be the solution in every case, because it's a framework and it provides like a coupled solution. So consider a scenario where you don't want to follow their file-based routing system. If you want to use any other routing-based solution, then you might not achieve that solution with Next.js. So you need to, in that cases, you need to use React or any other frameworks.
Yep. And as you mentioned there, Next.js does have certain conventions that you do kind of need to follow if you want to do some different things in there. Like you said, as file-based routing. So when you create a folder within Next.js and then you create a page.js within that folder, that will automatically create a route for the name of that folder. So if you wanted a different routing system, then you might not use Next.js. And also has different conventions when it comes to kind of creating different layouts for your pages, or kind of doing your API, or doing different things like that, to where if you didn't really like those conventions, then you might kind of look towards a different framework. And I know we didn't talk about this beforehand, but are there any other frameworks that you kind of like when it comes to React? I know there's also Remix, and I just talked to
Gatsby.
Yep, there's Gatsby, and there's also like Quick is just, I think it maybe just came out of beta or just released version 1. I know it's super new. So are there any other frameworks that you've had experience with, or that you like, or that you think would also might be a good option if someone found that they didn't really like some of these conventions that Next.js kind of puts them in?
So actually speaking, I don't have any more experience about Next.js also. I've just started Next.js from last 6 to 7 months, and I also learned something about the Remix. So how Remix and Next.js differs, the basic overview. So I don't think that I should speak about that, because I don't have any kind of deep knowledge about it.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I've mainly focused on just React in general, Next.js. I also have done like some stuff with Django, but apart from that, my knowledge base of like the intricacies of Remix and versus Next.js, or even I know with Quick, I just had a podcast last week with someone that is from like the Quick team, and kind of explained some of the benefits of that compared to Next.js, which is definitely something I want to play around with a bit more. But yeah, I think that there's a ton of React kind of frameworks out there, in which if you find that Next.js isn't a good option for you, there's definitely an option that someone will probably get along with a bit better there. So I think kind of with that, are there any other kind of core concepts of Next.js that you think are important for someone to understand when they're kind of getting into it? I mean, we covered a few of them here when it comes to kind of different rendering patterns of Next.js and the file-based routing system, as well as talking about server components a bit. But are there any other kind of core concepts that you think someone should know about when kind of getting into it before we kind of move on here?
So first thing I like to mention is, I also mentioned it before, but you need to know basic stuff about SEO. If you are using Next.js, that's the main powerful feature that Next.js provides over React. So you need to learn about SEO. So different tags, different meta tags and everything. So that should be learned. Then Next.js also provides inbuilt performance optimizations. Then the main feature that broke all of the videos on the YouTube, the app directory. So you should also be learning app directory.
Yep, and I would say the Next.js docs are a good place to kind of go to learn about that, as well as I think they do a great job with their docs and they provide some really good examples. And I would say, as well as reading the docs, creating your own kind of app just to kind of play around with the topic that you're trying to learn is definitely helpful as well. So I think with that, is there kind of any general kind of common mistakes that you see someone make when they use something like Next.js, or even kind of in React in general? Any mistakes that you see people make that are pretty common?
Yeah. So first of all, if you are learning React or Next.js, working with it, you need to have a clear functions, clear concepts of JavaScript. So the core concepts of JavaScript are needed. If you are working on a basic projects like calculator, tic-tac-toe and everything, then those are not needed. But if you are going with the high level of stuff, like any of the clones or any of the bigger projects, then the core concepts of JavaScript are needed. If you don't know about that, if you have never practiced JavaScript call stack and everything, if you don't know about that, the event delegation model, event propagation model, how events actually work, event bubbling, event capturing, everything, then if you are going to consider a scenario where you are creating a custom context menu using React. So in that case, you need to know about the event capturing, event bubbling. So it's the basic JavaScript stuff. If you haven't practiced about that, then you are not going to create that high level of components. So that's the mistake that I have faced with my students on my YouTube channel, that they have not clear concepts about JavaScript. So learn JavaScript. JavaScript.info is the best place to learn JavaScript. If you can read, if you want to watch the videos, then there are amazing videos on YouTube. But if you want to read, and JavaScript info is the best place. I've learned JavaScript from it only. I've not watched any video, by the way. So after that, don't just jump into Next.js, learn React, practice with it, do some advanced level of projects, high level of projects, then do some deployment with React also, how everything differs from the creating of the application to the deployment of the project, how then build your applications with different like Babel, like Wheat, how everything differs like that. So that's the advantage. Then before learning Next.js, you should know why you are learning Next.js or React. Not only Next.js, if you are learning any framework, then you should know why you are using that framework. Why should not we use the basic language that is providing? So if I apart from Next.js, if I talk about Tailwind CSS, if you're using Tailwind CSS, then you should know about CSS, and you should know why you are choosing Tailwind CSS over CSS. So you should know about that. So that's the thing that you should learn first. Then apart from that, you should also experiment with different libraries. So I'll just give a scenario from the time when I learned about React. I just used, for the state management, I used Redux. And after that, I started with Redux Toolkit. And when I started to learn Next.js, and when I was creating my first project with Next.js, so my go-to thing for the state management was Redux Toolkit. I followed the same procedure from the docs which I used in React, and it was working. But after some days, I noticed that there was an issue with hydration stuff. So it was like some quirky stuff to solve. So I experimented with different libraries. You should know about that, doing some R&D about that. So I came in with Zustand, and I started using Zustand for Next.js, and it's a very good library, by the way. So that's the thing you should also learn. Experiment with different libraries. Don't just use a single stuff.
Yep, absolutely. And I think that, making sure that you understand the core web technologies before jumping right into something like Next.js, or even before jumping into React, making sure that you really have a good understanding of how CSS works, how HTML works, and how JavaScript works. If you know those things, then you're going to be so much better suited to actually understand what's going on with React as well as Next.js in general. So I think that's really good advice there. It sounded like maybe there was something else that you were kind of thinking there at the end. Was there anything else you wanted to mention regarding that?
Yeah. At the end, after you have learned everything, don't stop there. Don't just create projects that are not useful. Create projects that are useful to the community. Do open source work. Participate in the open source projects. Like if you're using Material UI or any of the open source libraries, then they have their GitHub repository, and you can head over to there and you can see that there are many open issues there, and you can work on them. If you are doing this, you learn many new technologies, and you learn how the industry standard practices in real-time work. So you should also work on open source projects.
Absolutely. And I think that it's, for me, what accelerated my kind of learning the most when I was starting out was actually trying to build my own projects rather than just like following along with a tutorial and doing everything that they did and just like literally just copying their code as they wrote it. I think that that's probably not doing a ton for someone. Rather, like if you are following along with a tutorial and they say that they're going to build out this feature, really try to go build that out on your own first, run into some problems, solve those problems, and then see what you come up with, and then watch what they do and how they structure it. And maybe you'll pick up things a little bit better kind of following that process. And by building your own applications, and like you said, building applications that are actually interesting to you, applications that you're like, hey, this would be actually useful in my life, or I would have fun building this, or something like that. So I think that's really good advice there. So I think with that, maybe as just one final topic here, is there any technologies right now that you are particularly excited about, or you're like, man, I really need to go learn this because this seems really cool? Or is there anything that kind of really excites you in the world of kind of web development these days?
Just to Next.js is my go-to choice now, and I can't say that I have mastered Next.js. I know all this stuff. I have created high-level projects. I have also done freelancing work for Next.js, but still, I want to go deep into the Next.js, the patterns that we can do, the high-level stuff that we can do. So I want to just learn Next.js more. I'm interested in it. Apart from that, I've just mentioned that I learned Prisma about some time back, and I'm also interested with that, using high-level stuff of Prisma and Next.js integrated with it. So I'm also interested in that. And apart from that, I have been working on my open source project, Frontend Vita. So that's a React library for hooks and the tools that generally web developers use, like the HTML2, not converters, but the beautifiers and prettifiers and everything. So in the current scenario in online, if we head over to like any website that prettify my JSON, so if you head over to any website, they are all cluttered with ads and old interfaces. So I'm working on that project with Next.js. We just provide those solutions and creating a React library named as Vita Hooks. It's online, by the way. It has bugs, and provide some hooks that are not covered by the general libraries for hooks that we use. That's the thing that I'm focusing currently.
Awesome. And it sounds, pretty similar to me, to where I feel pretty comfortable with like Next.js and React and kind of a lot of the front end stuff. But I think that for me personally, diving more into, and I would say generally throughout my professional career, I've been front end focused, where it's been like, 80-20 front end to back end, to where I think that learning Prisma and other things that I can do within like the Next.js API and just getting better at that will definitely make me a better developer, and is definitely a route that I want to go with, kind of learning things at this point of feeling like I have a pretty good grasp on kind of front end stuff. And also that sounds like a very cool kind of library that you're building. I think that at some point, actually like building a library or building a product or something like that would also be really cool there. So I think with that, that's coming up on time here. If people want to kind of follow you and kind of get access to your tutorials or see that the clone projects you're building, or kind of just follow what you're doing online, where should people go for that?
Just head over to my YouTube channel, Kishan Sheth. It's everything there. I just do tutorials on YouTube only. Then apart from that, I also write articles on Dev.to and Hacker Noon. So just search for Kishan Sheth and you can find my profile.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for coming on today. I think we covered a lot of helpful stuff and I really appreciate it.
Yeah. Thanks for having me, yeah.